Welcome to the Stories of School Leadership podcast, the podcast where we elevate the voices of and create connections between inspirational leaders from the UK and around the world. I'm Emma Lurie, and thank you for joining me as I share these journeys, inspirations, and stories of education, leadership, and life. In this episode, I'm joined by Malarvilie who shares her experience of education in London in the 80s when the strikes were happening, and the value of an education that might happen at school, and the value of it takes a village, and our communities are really important places for us to gain education as well. And she shares her experience into her teaching career, slightly wiggly, and she also explores her experience of leadership and some really fantastic opportunities, but also toxic work environments and the impact that that can have. And she shares her passions around the importance of communication skills and coaching and the sort of work that we can be doing in schools with our leaders and our educators to make sure that we are happy and successful. So I really enjoyed interviewing Malarvilie. Let's get going. Hi, Malarvilie. It's so fab to have you with me. As I said to you before we started recording, I've been following you for ages, so I'm really excited that I get to find out more about you and your journey in education. Can you just share with us for a minute, who you are, where you are in the world, and what your current role is?
Okay, so my name is Malarvilie. I'm from London, and the last 3 years I've been living in Valencia, in Spain. And what I do is leadership development. I'm a leadership development consultant, so I run courses for leaders in education and elsewhere, and I'm a one-to-one coach as well.
Amazing. So needed in the
Yes.
fab. Okay, well, let's track all the way back, because I love finding out about people's own schooling experiences and seeing whether there was any indirect leadership that was already happening in your childhood.
Oh.
So tell us, where did you go to school and what was that like for you?
Okay, so I grew up in East London in Manor Park, near West Ham, in the London Borough of Newham. So incredibly deprived area. And so one of my first memories of infant school, so I must have been about 5, um, wasn't a very nice experience. I'm afraid it was the 70s, so it's like late 70s, 1978. And I just remember a bunch of kids pushing me into the corner and saying and shouting "Packies out" with pure, hatred on their faces. And I didn't understand what it meant, but I didn't want to be it. And that has always stayed with me, the just the pure hatred that I saw in their faces. Went to primary school and I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's still my favorite experience of my own education. It was just fun. The teachers were great. Um, the teachers were incredible, actually. And um, yeah, I mean, what was sad, in one way it was great, in another way it wasn't great, was that I was in the gifted and talented group. So we got to do great things, which now that I'm grown up, I'm like, why didn't everybody get to do that? Because it's really, I was allowed to learn to play the piano, and we were allowed to go into the computer room in the days when there was ZX Spectrum, and play on the computers, the new computers that had come out. And looking back now, that's pretty awful that we were allowed to do that. But it was also it was great for me as well. Yeah, so I loved primary school. Secondary school was unfortunately I hit secondary school at the point when all the strikes were happening. So that was 1984. I started first year or year 7. And I went up to the music teacher and I said, "Oh, do you do music club? Like, can I learn to play the piano?" Really enthusiastic. And he laughed in my face. Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, okay." There were no clubs. I mean, I was quite the little joiner, to quote uh, Dirty Dancing, but like I was probably in about 15 clubs in primary school. You name the table tennis, animation club, piano, recorder. I was in the choir, I was everything. And then got to secondary school and there was nothing. Um, I didn't go to a great secondary school. It was pretty awful, actually. Um, I remember a lot of just standing around in corridors and just mucking about with my mates, waiting for the teacher to turn up. And then when they did turn up, they'd say they're going off to do some photocopying, and they never came back with any paper.
They were just going for a cup of tea, weren't they? They were
They
like,
were
oh, I
going
don't
for a
really fancy
fag.
this today.
And teachers would come back drunk on a Friday.
Back in the
What
day
were
when
you
you could
doing
go
the
to the
week?
pub on a Friday.
Yeah. Well, when I did my PGCE, we did that on a Friday. But like some of the teachers did that during the day, during every day. It wasn't just a Friday. Yeah. So it was yeah, it was pretty it was a dodgy school, but it was actually it got better when I was there compared to like when my elder brothers and sisters were there because they were like 8, 6 and 5 years older than me. And so they were there during the riots and when the National Front were marching up the street and stuff like that. So it was really rough when they were there. And so when I was there, it was much better, but it was still an awful, awful school. Awful school.
Did you like the social element of it? Did you have
Yeah, I had great friends.
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
had,
sometimes that's what people do remember from school or other educational establishments like university or something, is their teaching was rubbish, but I had great friends and it was,
yeah, I had
you
great
know,
friends. I mean, it was typical of us Asian kids in sixth form. We used to hang out in the library. Previous to that, I just remember bunking off school and going to the park. Having when there's long hot summers where we'd just be having huge water fights in the park and stuff like that. So yeah, it was brilliant in that sense. But
yeah,
educationally, it was pretty shocking. I didn't they didn't get the best out of me,
no.
really.
And it
Yeah.
sounded like you were from that primary experience that would have been such a, nugget of somebody who would have sucked it all up, sucked it all up probably and really enjoyed it. It's
Yeah, I would have
amazing.
loved it. And like I was in a few, I think there were certain clubs, like electronics club was created or something, and I vaguely remember being in that, and so I enjoyed that. But generally, I think my primary school education just set me up for the rest of my life, really. In terms of what I got into. I loved writing. Um, I'd loved reading. I could read before I went to school because my older brothers and sisters were reading, so I'd be looking over their shoulder. So everyone was on the Peter and Jane books, and I was on, I think they were called Wolf books or something, which were like bigger books than that. Um, and when my sister was doing Of Mice and Men, when she was doing her O levels, I was reading it when I was 10 years old. So that kind of thing. So I was I was kind of self-educating in a
Yeah,
way because of my older brothers and sisters. I was doing what they were doing.
you had that access in a different way, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Oh,
then outside of school, around 1984, it was perfect timing, really. A temple arrived at the bottom of the road, same road as me. And the school was on the same road as me. Every school I went to was across the road. Yes, perfect. And at the temple I learned Indian classical dancing and singing and so I got my outlet from there because I wasn't getting that from school. So the cultural element and the musical side, the creative side was coming from there.
yeah.
So yeah, I really
That's really
enjoyed
interesting.
that.
I just, yeah, maybe think about that. I don't know. It feels certainly now in the last, I don't know, it's been going that way for a while that if, we're very focused on school being the everything. Sometimes,
Mm.
all of that learning's got to happen through school. And while okay, school's doing their absolute best to provide extracurricular opportunities, etc., actually, can it be, or is it absolutely right and proper that our communities provide those things for
it
us. It
takes a
takes a
village.
village. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's,
it takes a village, and
yeah.
I think it's something the new government is talking about youth centres and more of other things. I mean, I remember when I was at school, and we had a massive playground. Hopefully they still got it, but like, huge playground. And but they took part of it to create a youth centre on site.
Mm.
So after school, we all had somewhere to go. And we used to hang out and play table tennis and play pool and just hang out. But it was somewhere to go where we weren't up to mischief in the streets. So, and I think, and like teachers would hang out, come over and say hi to us, and just, it built relationships. And I think that's important outside of school or,
Yeah, so
as an
important.
extension of school or something. But you need that kind of, because I went to Sundays, I went to Tamil school. So I learned Tamil, how to read and write it. I was the oddball because I had a Cockney accent as I was speaking, being born and brought up in London. So I was the oddball, but it was an extension. It was another place where I learned things, and I learnt about Tamil poetry and, Indian culture and so on. So it was, yeah, I think that's important to have
Yeah.
different outlets.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really got a sense of when you were talking, about your primary schools more so, and secondary school in bits, was that like sense of belonging, and like you're talking about that sense of belonging to other places, and considering that initial experience that you had, the abuse that you suffered, and that first little experience of early years education. It's positive to hear that, you know, hopefully that didn't set you up for that. But did you experience more abuse throughout primary and secondary? Or was that something that was a bit of a thread?
Um,
Mm.
in primary school, not at all. It
Okay.
wasn't, there wasn't that, there was no sense of that at all. Outside of school, yes, it was everywhere. Yeah, it was pretty, yeah, where I grew up was awful. In that sense, it was everywhere. Um, and in secondary school, I think initially no. Um, but then the bullying, in a way, I realized that I had privilege because we didn't have school uniform, right? And that made a difference because um I was wearing Western clothes, and a lot of my friends who are from different backgrounds wore their traditional clothes, and so they stood out more. And then you've got the Muslim kids that are wearing hijabs and stuff, or niqab. I can never remember which one it is, but like they're wearing head coverings, and so they were targeted in
Mm.
terms of. And the thing is, the bullies happened to be kids that were in my class in primary school. And so they didn't bully me. But when they went for my Muslim best friend, I stood up for her. And I remember it was PE. So it was always PE when they'd kick off. We'd all be left alone in the changing rooms, getting changed and that. And then the bullies would, unless we were playing hockey, because then they'd be going for us doing that. But I do remember very clearly they started on my best friend, and I stood up and I was like, leave her alone. And then I turned around, everyone disappeared. And um it was interesting thinking back now. On one side were the white kids and maybe the odd black kid, and on my side where I was sitting was all the Asian kids. And but I had no issues with anybody because I knew them all from primary school. And then when they started on my best mate, um, all the Asian kids disappeared. They ran out the room. I went into the toilets, and next minute, about seven kids walked in from the other side of the room and were like, "Yeah, we're going to duff you up. We're going to put your head in the toilet, blah, blah, blah." And I turned around and it was like, okay, sod this. And I just went, come on then.
Good for
I just went,
you.
come on then. Because I thought if I'm going down fighting. And this is partly because I'm the fourth child.
You've had to
Yeah,
fight
so
your
I had to
way.
fight all the way. And like I was like, come on then. And then suddenly, instead of seven, there were two kids in front of me. And I was like, where did the others go? And they were like, well, we're only leaving you alone because we're already in trouble with the head teacher. And I was like, okay. And then yeah, they let me be after that.
I mean, it shouldn't be that way, but well done for you to standing up to them.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
teenage years are tough, aren't they?
oh God,
Yeah,
yeah, they're vile, especially
they are.
girls.
Let's move on from teenage years. So you mentioned that you felt like primary school kind of set you up for
Yeah,
your journey. So tell me about how how did you get to the point where you thought, I know, I'll go into education. That's a great life choice.
I cut it. Do you know what? I used to write a diary from the age of 13 up until I had children. 13 till 40, let's say. Um, and because I just didn't have the time to do it. And I've got it in my diary, 19th of June, 1990. I think I want to be a teacher. And it's like written right there. Um, and what happened was we were in sixth form and we had to organize our own work experience. And I didn't know I didn't have a clue. Both my
Nobody
parents
does.
worked at factories and I didn't know what I was doing. And one of my mates was going to a primary school. And I said, oh no. And she was like, why don't you do the same? And I was like, okay, there's loads of those about. So I contacted a primary school and I went into a primary school to do work experience. And I enjoyed the teaching side. I I felt that primary was too young for me. Probably because they weren't too far away from me. But I don't know. I just felt like they were just too young for me. And I found it a bit, it's not for me. So I knew I wanted to teach, but I wasn't sure what. And then when I was 18, when I was at sixth form, I did economics at God knows why. I did economics A level at school. I did history A level at Newham Sixth Form College, and I did government and politics at Cumberland School. So three different A levels because my school didn't do the things that I wanted to do. So I went to three different places to do my A levels.
Wow.
And my A level teacher, Mr. Fullick, was incredible, absolutely incredible. And I absolutely adored him. I loved him. He was funny, he was so knowledgeable. The way he taught was engaging, and I just absolutely loved it. And he was so encouraging of me. Um, he was fantastic. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to teach history because I loved history. I absolutely loved history. And yeah, that's what it was like. Yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do.
Oh, amazing. So many people say that. Didn't know what I
Yeah,
do. Like fell into, did a bit of work experience, thought, oh, I could do this.
yeah,
And then yeah, that a real commonality around being inspired by another teacher. Because
yeah,
ultimately it is that, isn't it? It's seeing somebody else being in a way that inspires you. I guess
yeah,
in any job role that can happen, can't you? Thinking that's what I
yeah.
want to be when I grow up. I still say that I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but there we are. um Amazing. So did you pursue that? How did well, I guess what's that next bit of
Well,
your journey into kind of actually teaching and then into leadership as well?
I was very clear that, so obviously by 18, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. It still took me another 10 years before I did my PGCE. There were a lot of barriers. I mean, part of the barrier was the school I went to. It was awful. And and plus I left home at 17. And so I completely failed all my A levels. Yeah, I was a very good student, but my head was all over the place. And so it was very difficult. But I persevered. In fact, on my mirror, I had three words: perseverance, diligent, and sedulous. I had three words. That sounds really boring, right? But I had three words on my mirror. And there were words I looked at every day, and it was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. So every time a hurdle came, I'd look at that, those three words, and this is who I am, this is who I am, and I'm going to do this. And I got myself to university. I mean, my A-level results the next time round were still one of the greatest days of my life. Um, and I just knew that's it. That's, and I rang up the university, said, am I in? Am I in? She goes, yeah, you're in. It was, yeah, I was the first one to university in my family. Um, and it meant I could get out of East London. It meant that this is the beginning of the rest of my life. And university, 3 years. I mean, it was my old university's freshers' day yesterday, and it was just from day one to the day we left, it was just the most incredible experience, and I just loved every minute. I just absolutely loved university. It was,
Right. I mean, it's
yeah,
expensive. We live in a university town where I
mm,
went to university here as well. Yeah,
yeah,
I still get really excited when I see them all turning up. I drove somewhere
yeah,
yesterday and there's just hordes of them. They were all arriving
yeah,
at airports. I'm like, oh, it is such an exciting time. And a lot of people say that university is where they really came into their own in terms of their own learning, because you get
mm,
to really pick that narrow opportunity
yeah,
of something you're fascinated in. So no longer have you got all these competing pressures of different subjects, even though it's hard work.
mm,
Potentially, if you've been able to do that, you've chosen something that is within your passion that you love. And so,
yeah,
yeah, everything can come alive when you have those opportunities.
yeah, yeah. I,
Amazing.
I, I loved my degree. I mean, I found A levels harder than my degree, to be honest, because
Yeah.
by the time I got A levels set me up for my degree. So I was, I mean, by the end of A levels, I was tutoring some of my classmates. I taught myself A level politics because I stopped going to come to that school because it was just, the teacher just talked about themselves and when they were canvassing for the Liberal Party
Oh God.
at the time. And I was like, I'm not learning anything here. So I just contacted the exam board, got all the old exam papers and taught myself, created my own scheme of work. I did the same with maths. I taught myself GCSE maths as well because I had to resit that. Yeah.
But
And
it's
there was
very,
a,
I mean, obviously, yeah, you were diligent and you were working hard at it.
mm,
But it's possible, I think now there's a lot of talk, isn't there, around people, there's different routes to how we can, take those next steps. And there's online schooling and there's homeschooling and there's other. And actually,
mm,
as people, as young humans, we are able to learn and there's different
yeah,
routes to do it. And you've been brave enough to pick because you had to, because of the circumstances of a terrible school. But, like, it's possible to do those things, which is amazing. So what were your first
yeah.
steps into a career in teaching like, and then into leadership?
Well, I always thought that I wanted to either lecture at a further education or university. And my university lecturer said, "Oh, send me your CV," and I was like, and the thing was, I didn't have the confidence, even though two of my university lecturers said that to me. Oh, yeah, you'd be great. Send us your CV. And I was like, that's crazy. University lecturers don't look like me. And like they do now, but like not then. And yeah, so I kind of fell into a different thing. So whilst at university, I was working a part-time job in a bookmaker's. And when I graduated, there was kind of a fight between a lot of the managers in the different betting shops because they wanted me as their full-time cashier. Because usually, when you're a good cashier, you become a manager. And I'd been doing it 3 years. So because I'd been doing it part-time while studying. And so they were like, oh, she's a good cashier. We want her. So there was a fight on. And I chose, it was basically my choice to be in a certain shop. It was easy to get to, um, in the middle of Shepherd's Bush, a really rough shop. And I didn't particularly like the manager that much, but I said to him, that, yeah, I'll be your cashier, but you need to back up all of us because there was three cashiers. You need to back us up when something kicks off, and I'm not making you tea, and you don't touch me. So those were, yeah, those were my three conditions. And he's like, I won't. So yeah, yeah, it was the 90s.
You didn't step straight into a teaching job then.
Yeah. And actually, I ended up getting promoted. I had to do these maths exams in bookmakers to become in turf accountancy to become a higher grade cashier. And then I had to do another exam, and I was only doing it so I can get more money per hour. And then it was like, oh well, if you do this course, you can be an assistant manager, and when it's my day off, you can take over, and you get this amount a day. And I was like, right, I'll do that, because I couldn't afford to do my PGCE yet. You when you're funding yourself, there wasn't bursaries or anything like that. And yeah, so then I passed and you have to get more than 95% to pass. And so I passed, and then my manager went off sick for a few weeks, and this was like one of the biggest shops in the in the district. I was like, and because I showed that I could handle it and handle the customers, I got promoted. I got my own shop. I know. It was in Parsons Green, this little shop in Parsons Green. It was very cute little shop. Only took about 80 bets a day. Um, but then 6 months later, I got, I applied and I got promoted and I was back in Twickenham. Um, I had a shop there in Witton. And then I got a shop it was a level 3 shop, a grade 3 shop in back in near Shepherd's Bush again, Acton Vale. And this was my shop for a good couple of years. And they used to call me school mom because it was a shop that nobody wanted to take on. And I went in and I didn't bar people. I said, you're not allowed in for the next month. Until one guy, I remember saying to him, get a shave, put on a new shirt, come back in with the right attitude, and don't give my staff abuse like this. And he'd come in every now and then, and I'd said, no, not till the 8th or whatever date it was. And then one day he walked in, and I looked at the date, and it was the right date. He'd got a new shirt, he'd shaved, he was semi-sober. Yeah. And yeah, so he was allowed back in. And it was, yeah, I enjoyed it to an extent, but it wasn't my passion.
No, but I feel like you were creating a community. I knew there was there was a sense of the teaching going on there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
You were like shoehorning your skill set, I think,
Yeah.
through a
Yeah.
job that wasn't the job you wanted to do. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were a bit shocked when I not only applied, but I got in to do my PGCE secondary history at the Institute of Education. It was like another greatest day of my life when I got that letter. So I was really happy that I'd got in, but my district manager was just in like, what? Because they saw me as going further up, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. But yeah, so I did my PGCE is where I met my best friend for life. And yeah, and that's when I got teaching. I got a job. My first job was in Southall, which was interesting because when my dad first came over to the UK, he came with his little brother. My dad ended up in West Ham. My uncle ended up in Southall. And there's big Asian communities in both those areas. And so in the school there was a little Tamil community of kids, and in my form group there was a Tamil kid as well, and so I could speak to the parents in Tamil in my dodgy Cockney accent, but but I could speak to the parents, or if a kid kicked off I'd be like, quite happy to ring your dad. No. No, don't do it. So
Secrets, there's a secret
yeah.
skill that you had there.
Yeah. But yeah, I was quite evangelical about teaching. I absolutely loved it. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I love the sort of
Yeah.
slightly squiggly
Yes.
journey into
Hugely
it. But
squiggly.
you learn so
Yeah.
much from each of those experiences, don't you? And
Oh God,
actually,
yeah. I think,
like,
yeah, I don't think I would have been, um, well, I became head of history after 2 years of teaching. I had my NQT year, then another year, then I applied at a different school, um, and I got that role, head of history, associate head of humanities. But I was ready for that after 2 years because of my managerial experience before.
yeah,
And I was training people in, I not only train people within my shop, but I'd have days where I'd go to head office at William Hill, William Hill. I mean, you can hear my Cockney accent there. William Hill, right? William Hill, in Liverpool Street, and I'd be training. I'd be running the induction there, so I kind of got into training people as well.
yeah. And those leadership skills span across, don't they? So that,
Mm.
ability to communicate well with others and support them, and yeah, structure
Yeah,
in a good way.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, what was your other strands to your kind of leadership experience? And I guess what was, maybe thinking about that experience of your betting shop history, what are like the key bits about leadership for you that were interesting or difficult?
What, within the betting shops
No,
or
in your
in
education, but I
in
bet there were some
education?
links in there. But yeah, did you take on some
Um,
other leadership roles?
I think yeah, I became head of history. And then my my next role after working in North London was back in West London in Hillingdon, and I was assistant principal, which included being head of humanities and head of house. Yeah.
Things to be doing.
It was a lot. Yeah. I mean, I look back now and it kind of gives me chest pain thinking about all the different hats that I
Mm,
used, but I was like, I did that for a good 3 years. And I loved that role. It was fantastic because I had my faculty, I could show, and they were all brand new, young, you name it, they were at, I had four teach first, two in their first year, two in their second year. I had a GTP, an OTP. Um, yeah, so I had about six staff that were all brand new. So it was the blind leading the blind. And so I come along and the school was total chaos. It was the days before special measures was a thing. So it was a school that was on a notice to improve. And so there was a lot of work to be done. I mean, the history results were like 19%, something like that. Yeah, pretty woeful. Um, and yeah, so there was a lot to be done, a huge amount to be done. But I recognized quite early on that the people I had within the team, although they were inexperienced, they were amazing. But they had great ideas. I mean, they had been stifled by my predecessor. And I was saying, oh, I'd like to change the history curriculum. Crime and punishment is much more interesting, blah, blah, blah. And one of the guys said, yeah, but that's teaching them about the Romans. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, but the predecessor had said, oh, we can't teach them about that. They don't know about that. And I was like, well, that's what we do. We're educators. We're educating them. And they were like, oh. And I was like, if you've got ideas, come to me with them. And they were very suspicious at first because my predecessor was completely different. And then when they disagreed with something, they expected me to just be like a dictator. And I'll be like, well, let me have a think about that. I'll go away, have a think. And I'll be like, you were right. That is, you're completely right about that. So we won't be doing that because it's not right for this. And they were in absolute shock when I was like that. And I thought, this isn't about my ego. This is about the kids. This is about what's best for the kids and what's best for the staff. And that's what my role is all about.
mm. And
Yeah.
that's great leadership, isn't it? Being, because I don't know if it matters at what point you are on in your journey, being able to be that leader who
brings people together. And I guess hopefully it is amazing having people at the start of their careers, because just for the nature of their past experience, they had only probably had a little bit of that past experience. They were still open enough to be imaginative, come with new ideas, be brave to
Yeah.
try different things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the willingness to do that, it is amazing when, that hasn't necessarily changed. There is still a lot of dictative, is that a word? Dictation.
Dictator. There's a lot of
Dictators
commanding leadership.
in leadership.
Yeah.
And I guess this idea that there's a right way or a wrong way, like it's got
Yeah.
to be this way. And I think, my experience is primary, but certainly when we see, some policies coming in or some programs of ways that we've got to teach, and while yes, okay, lots of them might have research backing, sometimes it feels like there's this push that this is the only one way you can do something,
Yeah.
without the recognition that actually this could be one great way, but for our
Yes.
children, for our cohort, for
Yeah.
the staff that we've got, for our demographic, for the nature of our
Context is
school,
key. Yeah,
what is
absolutely
actually going to
key.
work for us?
Yeah, and that's the way, I mean, like, because my faculty did really, we became the best faculty in the school, and results went through the roof. I mean, every year we got the best value added award for religious education. Because our results were, children who were expected to get E's were getting like B's and C's, so the value added was through the roof. And because what I I didn't want staff only focusing on the A's and B's and C's. I wanted them to focus on every child and for them to progress, looking at the marginal gains. What marginal gains can each child make to develop? And because of that, all the children in our classes improved. And that had a huge impact on the results for the entire school. Um, After that, I mean, we had an Ofsted where we became outstanding, which, a lot of us cried in the staff room because we put our heart and soul into that school. And oh my God, it was an incredible, incredible moment when we were told that. And then our school was federated with another school, and my head teacher said that he wanted me to be senior assistant principal across the two schools. Because the other school was, let's say, our school was known as the refugee school, the immigrant school. The white kids would walk past our school to get to their school. Um, People wouldn't touch our school with a barge pole. Um, and then our school became outstanding, and the school down the road became not so great because they got complacent and pretty poor leadership. But it didn't mean that they had awful teachers. It was just poor guidance. And my role was CPD across the two schools, but it was also building bridges between the two so that they didn't feel like, oh, this school has taken us over and just telling us what to do and be dictating to us and that. And then we became a multi-academy trust. So we had early years, we had nursery, early years, primary, two secondaries, a studio school. And yeah, I think there was 9 schools by the time I left.
Wow.
So yeah.
What a journey. When you were just talking earlier, I was really drawn to just kind of going back to that idea of those marginal gains and how you kind of that real recognition on everyone. And I just wondered if that linked back to your experience in primary school, where you were talking about like the gifted and you being that gifted and talented, you having that opportunity. And it sounds like in your leadership, your recognition of staffing in terms of everybody having a voice, but yeah, this idea of the pupils as well, that recognition, like we want the best for all of them and we want to step them forward without that separating out of these ones will achieve the A's and we're going to focus on them.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it's the same for staff as well. Because what I did after that was, because I had a son by then, and I wanted to lower my work rate because it was just off the chart. When you're working across 9 schools and you haven't been inside 2 of them and you're responsible for performance management, it didn't feel right to me. So I dropped down to just responsible for teaching and learning at one school, in a school not within the trust. And at that school, certain members of staff had always been brought out as, these are outstanding, you need to be just like them, and there was this real kind of them and us feel. And and I just thought that's not, my key values are equality and development and developing everyone, but not trying to say that, oh yeah, this is the right way, this is the only way you do that. So it I think it's a strong thing for me that everybody gets that equality of opportunity to develop, and people don't feel kind of, oh, I'm not as good as them. I rarely gave grades to my students. I think I'd give them targets and they'd say, well, what grade is it? And I was like, do that, hit that target and I'll tell you.
Yeah. And you get there, next step.
Yeah, next step.
So what were your next steps? Because I want to know a bit more about what you're kind of doing now and how you got into the space that you're working in now after lots of leadership.
Well, the school we decided we needed to move out of London because my husband was a maths teacher. We were both working in the same school where I was the assistant principal, and it was a pretty toxic school. It was, out of all the schools I'd worked in great schools, difficult school. Every school was difficult. Every school was in a deprived area. This school, the last school I worked in, had 4 head teachers in less than a year. And I'm pretty sure governors didn't have a clue what they were doing. They talked the right talk, but there was, it was pretty awful. But we decided we're going to move to Bournemouth. We got, we had a friend there, and we wanted to have another child, and we wanted our children to grow up outside of London. I mean, my husband grew up in just outside, 20 miles north of Dublin. He grew up by the sea. When he talked of his childhood, and this is what I remember at university as well, when other people talked about what they did growing up, which was like they'd go off into the forest or they'd go by the sea. And what did I do? I just played in the streets, dodging the racist gangs. Try not to get my head kicked in. But like there was one park in the neighborhood, then it was miles away. So I didn't want that for my kids, and I wanted something more. So we moved down to Bournemouth, and I have to say that was interesting. We moved down when I was on maternity leave, and I decided to do a coaching course whilst on maternity leave. And then whilst doing this coaching course, decided to set up my own business. My husband decided he was going to quit teaching as well because he was in a toxic school in Bournemouth.
Okay.
And I said that, well, let's just do this and try it for a year and see how it goes. And our eldest son hadn't started full-time school yet. And because of that, we were able to spend loads of time with him before he started full-time. Our youngest had never had any childcare until he started at nursery. And it meant we just got so much time with our children. And the point where our youngest was going to start school was when the pandemic happened. So I was upset because I was like, oh no, he's going to be starting school. And then it was like, actually, he's spent most of the year at home with us. And then we just removed them from school and decided to homeschool them because the government clearly didn't know what they were doing. So it was easier, right? You're staying home with us. At least we know you're safe then and not getting COVID. And then we decided, actually, because all our work ended up online, which was a difficult transition for me at first, because I was going up and down the country running training in lots of different schools, and then suddenly I'm doing everything online. So you have to think differently. I mean, everyone was going through that, weren't they?
Yeah.
And but actually people had more time to do stuff online. People seemed more savvy with Zoom, and so my courses became quite popular. So business was doing really well, and I felt like I was really helping lots of different people in coaching and running the courses and leadership courses and communication skills and emotional intelligence and so on. But because it moved all online, we thought, well, we could be anywhere. And my husband had been to Valencia like 20 years earlier and loved it. And so we moved.
The rest is history. There you are in Valencia. I bet it's super sunny and lovely.
You know what? The last 2 days it has not been.
Oh.
It's a torrential rain. It's like a
Oh.
monsoon. But previous to that, probably last time it rained was probably April or something like that. But yeah, it's been
You need a
glorious
bit
and
of, you need a
sunshiny.
bit of rain.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Well, tell me more about you know, like the courses and how does that work? Because is that all still in education? Do you still work
Yes.
predominantly with educators?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
you're
I have,
coaching.
yeah. So whilst I was a senior leader in my last school, I had a head teacher who wanted me to go full Big Brother, spot checks on teachers, and that's not my style. It's never been my style. I don't want to judge people. I don't want to, I'm all about the development. And so I'd done a couple of mini coaching courses, these freebies that you can go to at the coaching academy for a couple of days over the summer. And so I introduced coaching, and I got volunteers who I trained in coaching skills, and then introduced it to the whole school in the September. So I did all the prep beforehand in the summer term beforehand, then introduced it to the school, and then created this whole new teaching and learning database where it wasn't judgments. It was more about it was no judging on one lesson. It became, I mean, this is all the norm now, but at that time it wasn't. Where you're looking at books, but it's not book scrutiny. You just, making sure that the comments are helping the child to progress, and yeah, that sort of thing. And then creating buddying systems where people buddy up with each other, or coaching, and for those who aren't doing so great, to help them along, uh, give them a coach, and anyone who was a new member of staff got a coach. So I introduced all that. I mean, the head teacher was very much against this, so I had to, fight my corner.
But yeah, but you were used to doing that. That's
Yeah.
fine. You learned how to do that at a young age, so you
A
were the
very
right
young
person to
age,
be,
yeah.
pushing
So
back on it.
I stood my ground, and he was
Absolutely.
like, right, you've got a term. So he gave me a term, and I was like, how are you supposed to show any change in a term?
We
But
like to
then,
work in terms or years, though, don't we? And then if it's not done, oh, rubbish. It's
yeah, I mean,
we're
it's
just so fast paced.
ridiculous. It's crazy, because that's not leadership. Leadership, you need to think long term, and things don't happen overnight. And if they happen overnight, why is that happening? Is it superficial or is it embedded? I mean, what's going on here? But Ofsted came in January, and 14 of the 20 things that they praised were things that I'd introduced. Right? And as the head teacher was reading it out, and I remember this, I remember standing there going, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that.
If you can
Obviously, I
eat
didn't
your
do it on
words.
my own, but it was very much, it was stuff that I fought the corner over,
Yeah.
And then he at the end said, just want to thank Mal for this. And it was, Ofsted had said that it made a huge difference, a huge difference. A month later, I left on
Well, I'll take that.
maternity leave. I will
Yeah,
take that, and I will
I
leave,
know. Yeah.
because I left as soon as possible. I mean, with my first child, I went up to 38 weeks because that was Christmas. Perfect. He didn't come for another month. But so
A
sitting
bit
at home
naive with the
bored.
first one, don't you? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
fine, I don't need to worry about that. Yeah, I worked really right
Yeah.
up until the date. And then the
Yeah.
second one, I was absolutely huge, and I had to have a bucket of water under my desk because it was the summer and it was so hot, and I was
Yeah.
just big and swollen and horrible, and my friends were
Yeah.
constantly like, "Oh my gosh, please go and take mat leave because we're so worried you're just going to go into labour, like
Yeah.
right here in the office."
I
I was
took
like,
it
"I'm
as early
fine."
as possible because it was such a stressful school.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was part of the leadership team, but the leadership I'd be sitting in SLT meetings, tearing my hair out, going, how do people not know this? You know, it was just like people didn't know what they were doing. So they're making crazy decisions. And one of my last SLT meetings, I remember the head teacher saying this was the first SLT meeting after we'd had Ofsted. And he said, okay, so the governors and I have decided that we're going to have a Mocksted next week. And I was like, what? And all the other SLT head down, not saying a word. And I went, are you crazy? And I just, because I knew it was my last one, I just let rip. And I just went, why don't you just hand the TES to staff now? Because if you want to, you know, put them into the ground, why do they need a Mocksted next week? It's
Why did they need
crazy.
a Mocksted?
Need one, you know, so I just
No
let
one ever needs a Mocksted. I mean,
nobody needs
that's
a
it.
Mocksted, you
That's
know.
it.
It's just
Oh
so
my
anyway,
gosh.
he came back to me later in the day and he said, yeah, I've spoken to the governors, it's not going ahead. And I just looked at him, it's like, what, why did I need to point this out?
Oh, it's painful, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But now in your work, are those, I guess you've got such a wealth of knowledge and learning that you have, spanning your whole career and your childhood. Like, there's a lot in there that has
Yeah.
given you that grit and determination, because this side of things, running a business, that is tough in
Yeah,
itself, isn't it?
it
It's a whole
is.
different ball game that we just
Yeah.
don't get taught in education.
Mm. Yeah.
And so do you feel like, that route you're going down now in terms of the leadership and the coaching you're able to do, does it do all the things you want? Have you got other things you'd like to do in the future?
I don't know, for now it does. I mean, I'm very passionate about communication skills. Part of the I think a lot of the greatest difficulties within schools are because of the adults and
I
because
completely
of the
agree.
lack of communication and because people don't know how to deal with people. They know how to deal with kids
Well,
most
do
of the
they?
time, you know. I don't know. I
They
think
think they do.
they think they do, but actually, yeah, thinking about it, I don't even think they know how to deal with kids. I think there's real lack of emotional regulation in adults in teaching, and when stress levels go high, which they've been through the chart, particularly the last few years, that emotional regulation goes completely out the window. So people need to be taught emotional regulation. They need to be taught how to be more emotionally intelligent. And some people think that they're beyond teaching. They're like, oh no, this is the way I am. I mean, my son, my 8-year-old, said that to me the other day. And I went, don't you dare say that this is the way you are at 8 years old. You know, I'm learning A, B, and C right now. You know, there's always learning to be done. And I think that's really important for all teachers and leaders to realize. They learn in terms of teaching and learning. I think a lot of teachers, oh yeah, about that. That's a given. Yeah, of course I'm going to learn new things with teaching and learning. But when it comes to communicating more effectively with their colleagues and young people, much more learning needs to happen around there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think because of the way that the education system, certainly here in England, is set up, there's very, very limited, if no space, to allow for that, and the impact that we could have on the well-being, recruitment, retention of our teachers, which would then have a knock-on effect on our leaders, would have a knock-on effect, on the well-being and the attainment of our young people, if we could just create some of that space for people to reflect, have
Yes.
some time to, think about
It's
and
ironic.
learn, but think and explore, because I think a lot of it,
Yeah.
it's within us, we know, but we don't
Mm.
have the space and create the space and time to help people to think about their regulation. And I think there's a danger sometimes that we can, with a well-being, there's a lot, isn't there, out there about well-being and supporting people, and sometimes what that goes down to is, yes, here's a training session in an inset day that we're going to teach you about how to keep on top of your well-being, and that's amazing. But then if the implementation of the space to actually enact it isn't there, we've given like a little nugget of the jigsaw, haven't we? But we've not necessarily, like, the culture shift is not there in the education sector to enable that to happen. And so I think, we're getting there, aren't we? There's a focus on, trauma-informed approach, on regulation strategies, on, interpersonal skills, and it's coming, but I think we've got to marry it with flexibility. And, like when you talk about what the school system is like, and there's some big stuff to move forward on and change to make sure that we can make change for those adults, and some of the leadership that is out there, maybe through no fault of their own, because that's how they were led, and we get this very kind of narrow way of doing things.
I think so. And also the MPQs are great, but there isn't enough within the MPQs on coaching, I've got this thing where I talk about talk savvy. Talk savvy is a part of what I do, and it's where I post on social media and create worksheets and all kind of little mini podcasts and various different things on Talk Savvy, to give tips on how to talk about certain things. It might be as simple as how to write an effective email. I mean, like, how emails, when they look like an essay, and I'm like, I'm not reading that.
And you get them all the time, and
it's like, nobody's going to read this, and then you get annoyed that people aren't implementing what you've written in the middle of this huge tomb of information. So it's as simple as that, or it's your body language, or it's dealing with conflict. When people talk about having difficult conversations, I call it having essential conversations. It's important to have those conversations, and even a mind shift like that makes a difference. I need to have this conversation. When I think I've got to have a difficult conversation, I avoid it.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't want to do it. I need to have this conversation. It's important I have that conversation. And it's things like that, the mind shift. But also part of what I do is getting people to understand different personalities. And like, we've got extroverts and introverts. We've got people who love the detail, people who like a bit more slapdash. Nothing is bad. Everyone has their strengths, but it's you find it most difficult to work with someone who's nothing like you. And that creates the clashes. So how do I work with this person more effectively?
And all of that, all of those things that you've said, I can, already just think that's so valuable for leaders. And it's not, like you said, they're not necessarily the things that you get taught if you're doing programs, MPQH, other, those kind of leadership skills that are really complex. There's so much nuance in that, those sorts of things that you've been talking about. So important. Like, I was chatting to somebody the other day around the idea of, when you're in a leadership team, being able to talk to each other about how you, when you're feeling stressed, how do you need that person to help you with that? Do you want a hug? Do you want them to try and problem solve? Do you want to be left alone? And actually,
it's your love language at work.
Do we create enough? I mean, strong teams do, really amazing teams. When I think back to the teams that I've led, either we just knew and it worked, or we've spent time going, right, hang on a minute, how does that work? How do you need that? Because great teams are usually diverse in their thinking. Whether it, and ideally in their experience, that's when you're going to have the most strength. And recognizing, okay, like, I'm great at the ideas getting started, consistency is not my bag. Like, I get bored, I just want to hand it over to someone. So as I've learned and developed my leadership style, knowing that I need, we need a team around, or someone else who I can go, right, can you carry that on and figure out the logistics of it, please, because I'm bored of it now. But we don't, it's not probably commonplace to actually take the time to reflect on it and think about how things are working. And that's where the space of coaching is amazing, because
Mm.
those conversations and challenge, you can be challenged by a coach, can't you, to reflect on those
Yeah.
parts of your own leadership.
I think
But also,
self-awareness is key,
yeah,
isn't it? Because when
yeah,
you know yourself, and I always used to say that my greatest strength is knowing my limitations. And because of that, and I'd say as a caveat to that, I'd also say, or in addition to that, I'd also say one of my strengths is knowing the strengths of others, knowing the strengths of my team. So I can plug the gaps.
yeah.
So I could say, oh, because like when the deputy head said to me, oh, can you take on the student council? And I was like, oh my God, no, I can't. But I know a person who'd be
I
amazing
know
at
someone
that.
who can.
Yeah, and honestly, that person,
Delegation.
yeah, but that person took it and just ran with it. It was brilliant what he did with it, and it was his bag. It wasn't my bag,
You don't need to be the hero leader, do you, and do everything yourself.
Exactly.
Oh, Malarvilie, it's been so amazing to speak to you. I feel like we've talked for ages, and we could
Yeah,
probably carry on talking for ages, but thank you
good.
so much for sharing your journey and your experiences, and how they've led you to what you're doing today. And the work that you're doing today is so important and so needed. Tell us like your kind of company name and where people can find you. And when we post it, it'll have links and things, because
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds really important.
Okay. Company name is Mal CPD. Mainly because that was my first ever Twitter account when I was responsible for CPD. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Blue Sky. I've come off Twitter. Where else?
And your website?
TikTok now
Oh,
as well. TikTok, yeah, because I'm putting little videos on there, quick snippets about communication skills.
yeah. And
Yeah,
they sound really helpful. Absolutely. We
yeah,
need to be checking out those. Oh yeah, thank you
yeah.
so much. It's been so lovely to spend some time with you. I so appreciate your
Great
time.
to talk
Thank
to you as
you.
well, Emma.
Thank you so much for listening to the Stories of School Leadership podcast. We'd love to know what inspired you in this episode, so do get in touch and tell us your thoughts. And please share this with friends and colleagues. If you have time, a review would mean so much. It really helps us to reach more people. If you'd like to connect with me to follow my journey or access some support, maybe supervision, coaching, or early years consultancy, you can find me at Stories of School Leadership on Instagram. I'm Emma Lurie on LinkedIn, or my website is emmalurie.co.uk. I hope you have a great day, whatever you're getting up to next, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you.